It's almost been a badge of honor to skip breakfast to go at least until noon. But they've, over the recent years, they've found that that actually increases all cause mortality, especially cardiovascular mortality. And it's because we believe, again, theorize, they know that it increases all cause mortality, but it seems to be a greater stress in the body. So if you think about it, we wake up and our highest point of cortisol during the day is between 6 and 8 a.m., within the first typical hour or 2 hours after rising. So if we have high levels of cortisol, and we're putting greater stress in the body without feeling it. So, if we're dropping into low blood sugar, hypoglycemia, your body will actually produce something called cortisol. And cortisol is simply a stress hormone that tells your body to break down stored glycogen. So, glucagon will break down glycogen and it brings then sugar into the bloodstream for fight or flight based response. Now, it's not really a big deal if you have a super relaxed morning, you're meditating, you're doing like a, let's say a hatha yoga class. But if you're someone that's getting up, you're doing a hard workout, you're doing a cold plunge, you're starting your day in like rush hour traffic, your body, no matter what, needs fuel. And so it's going to break that fuel down somewhere from stored glycogen in the liver. And if that's gone from the muscle tissue, there's a lot of different processes. Well, no matter what, it's stress on the body. So that's one way to look at it. But the second is this. Think about eating your last meal of the day at 8 o'clock at night. Let's say you go to bed at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Okay, you've had this huge meal. Maybe you're doing one meal a day. Maybe you're just doing 2 meals a day, whatever it might be. You're taking in 1,000 calories, maybe even more, of hard to digest foods. Maybe it's a steak, maybe it's a good amount of protein, whatever it might be. Your blood sugar level and your digestion is most likely going to be elevated throughout the night. Now, we've tracked this in our practice. We see hundreds of thousands of people a year, and we use continuous glucose monitors and other processes. People can do this right at home. One of my big things is teaching people basically to how to be their own doctor, their own health practitioner. And because, I work with someone maybe once a week or maybe once a month, and there's 168 hours in a week, right? So you're with yourself 168 of those hours. You need to know these processes. But I'm telling you right now, your blood sugar with a big meal will still stay elevated, not just 2, 3 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, especially if it's a steak with some fat, with some carbs. You'll see multiple spikes throughout the night. Now, that means you're not bringing down your glucose levels while you're sleeping, your blood sugar levels, which means now you're not tapping into body fat as adequately. Because when your body's at rest, it is actually burning the greatest percentage of fat, not the most amount, but the greatest percentage at more of like, let's say, a zone 1, if you talk about kind of that exercise wise. So much lower cardiovascular taps into more percentage, not necessarily total. So between blood sugar alone and the stress in the body upon waking, what we want people to do is not necessarily, you don't have to eat immediately upon waking, but once you start the stressful part of your day, it's not detrimental. It's actually beneficial to start eating food and begin that fast more hours before midnight or more hours before you hit the hay, go to bed.
Yeah. Now, are there certain types of foods? And I love what you're sharing here because I think it's reconfirming something we were all taught when we were younger. Is like sounds like breakfast is in fact going to be one of the more important meals of the day. But in terms of like what we should be consuming, I know that this has been the case for me. I started fasting pretty regularly back in 2018. I think one thing I notice or at least experience out of it is during those fasted periods, especially in the morning, is heightened focus. Like really be able to lock in. I know, in the online coaching space or, even in kind of the biohacking space, it's like a lot of people will use this to increase their productivity of maybe what's called deep work, right? And I know sometimes certain foods will cause not brain fog, but it's like you kind of begin to experience more fatigue as you consume certain types of food. So if we're going to be eating earlier and in the day, what foods can we or what foods should we eat to avoid or allow us to still stay into that deep focus, heightened deep work flow state?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it is looking at it, what were we using instead of food? Meaning, are you able to wake up fasted and work? Or many people, they wake up and use a nootropic, or they wake up and use caffeine, or they wake up and do something to stimulate the body. So once we stimulate the body, we're stimulating norepinephrine. That's the first stress trigger. It's a stress neurotransmitter. We sometimes call it a stress hormone. We stimulate that, which is essentially adrenaline. We stimulate dopamine, and we stimulate then cortisol from the caffeine. So that's how most people, like, they're getting that focus. Like, no doubt about it, caffeine works. Certain dopamine precursors work. There's no doubt about that. But what I would say is this: do you have the same focus and energy if you're not using those? Because if you're not, you're just substituting one fuel source for another. We prefer people to use a healthy fuel source, such as food. Now, it comes down to, is your digestion strong enough in the morning to not use that energy to move towards digestion instead of focus. So we do something called liquid before lunch. So I work with a lot of executives, I work with a lot of high performers, athletes, etc. We do a very simple smoothie, typically a couple hours after waking. People can do greens powders, they can do whatever they want. But the smoothie is going to be protein, it's going to be slow digesting carbs or your berries, so high fiber, lower glycemic. And we're going to drink that. So typically, I have my people, my practice make about a liter. So that's 4 glasses of water. So it's or 4 glasses of fluid in that smoothie. And they're going to sip that while they're doing their work. So it's easy to digest, which means it's not taking a whole lot of energy from your gastric juices, from your stomach, to be able to get that fuel. And then it's time release. It's like an IV drip of nutrition into your body. Then lunch is going to be the bigger meal. And then dinner is going to be slightly smaller, easier to digest. Now, that's ideal world. I will let you know that I work through the day. So my lunch has to be fairly easy to digest as well. I'm not going to sit down to a steak or a whole chicken or whatever it might be, because now the blood flow is in my stomach, and that's not going to be helpful. So I can give you some tricks for digestion, digestive enzymes. You can use like I'll do sometimes a decaf black coffee afterwards, which is a great digestive aid without the stimulation there if you don't need it. Hot ginger tea is a great one. A little apple cider vinegar and room temp water or hot water. Lemon in that can be really nice. But like most people, my bigger meal, my protein meal, is still at night. I just try to have it before 6 p.m. and then I can get to bed. I try to get to bed by 10 p.m. And the reason is I'm up at 5:36 because even though I like to be a night owl, I know that the real benefits with the anti-aging come with getting to bed earlier. And I also like the quiet time before my 2 daughters wake up in the morning. I get to do my work, that for me, my me time work.
Yeah. And is that the ideal kind of window there? We've always been told, right? Don't eat an hour, don't eat 90 minutes before you go to bed. But is ideally you want about 4 hours before you kind of hit the bed to allow the digestion to kind of take place?
Yes, and it also depends on the meal that you're eating. Let's say you did soup before bed. Like if we go back in the day, it was fruit or easy, like the things you gathered, right? And then you would have maybe you catch food, whatever it might be, 1 o'clock or so, 2 o'clock. You'd eat something heavier, and then you might have soup, before bed or like a meager meal. That's going to digest quickly, if we think about that, right? So it's also like when we're thinking about how long is this meal going to take to digest? So I'm going to give you the breakdown. Fruit digests in your stomach in about 30 minutes. Starch, about 60 minutes. Your proteins and your raw veggies, like a salad, probably 3 hours. Could be two. For something like eggs, might be even quicker. But if you think about, okay, just think about chewing fish. Easy, right? Easy to chew, break down fish. Think about chewing a steak. It takes some time, right, to chew up that steak and swallow it and digest it. It just takes more time, the thermogenic effect, than to break that down. So, big steak before bed, more hours needed. Now, I can tell you this, it's 3 to 4 hours for most people with just a normal sized dinner. So, yes, that's the window. But you'll actually be able to look at this if you like to track your sleep, which I recommend everybody do. Whoop strap, Apple Watch, Aura Ring, Fitbit, whatever works for you. I'm pretty agnostic in terms of your tracking. I do like the Aura Ring because it's not on your wrist, but whatever works for you. Just do what you're doing now and look at your average over a week. I'm guaranteeing you, if you stop eating 3 to 4 hours before bed, same food, same everything else is equal, your deep sleep will improve, your resting heart rate will come down, and most importantly, your heart rate variability will increase. That means your body's resilience against stress will improve. Like, no doubt about it, you'll see better recovery.